It all started with a sense that something wasn't right, a feeling I couldn't shake. I'd come home from work, tired, going through our usual evening routine, but there was this distance in Jenny's eyes. She'd barely look up from her phone, give me one-word answers, and then disappear for hours working late. I wanted to believe it, trust her like I always had in our 8 years of marriage, but there were signs I just couldn't ignore anymore. The turning point came one evening when my best friend, Adam, dropped by for a beer. He brought up how Jenny seemed different, more distracted, even distant. It wasn't an accusation. Adam is the kind of friend who'll be honest when something's on his mind. "You're overthinking it," I told myself, shrugging it off, but inside, my gut was telling me to take a closer look. The rail break came by accident. One night, Jenny was at work late, and I decided to surprise her with dinner. I stopped by her office, flowers in hand, only to find her car gone. My heart pounded as I checked her usual spots around town. But no Jenny. When I got home, her laptop sat on the dining table. She never left it lying around unlocked, but tonight, maybe fate or maybe just a mistake on her part, it was open. The curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked. What I found there, the text, the photos, it was undeniable. She was seeing someone else. My world shattered in that instant. But I wasn't about to let her destroy everything we'd built. I called her sister Laura. Jenny and Laura had always been close. But there was a history between Laura and me, something unspoken. As we talked, I could tell Laura suspected something was up. I admitted the truth and laid everything out. The betrayal, the lies, the gut-wrenching proof. To my surprise, Laura was livid, not just for me, but at her sister's audacity. "Come over," she said. "Let's talk this out." I showed up at Laura's house, feeling a strange mix of anger, hurt, and something else I couldn't name. Laura was supportive, kind, comforting in a way that made me feel seen, understood. She'd always been the calm, steady one, a foil to Jenny's unpredictable nature. We sat on her couch, talking for hours, finding solace in our shared frustrations, our shared anger at Jenny's betrayal. And then it happened. One look turned into something more. We were both alone, both hurt, and somehow, in that moment, it felt right. I don't know if it was revenge, or just the simple human need for connection. But Laura and I crossed a line I never thought I'd even approach. For the first time in months, I felt truly alive, wanted, and the best part? Jenny had no idea. This was only the beginning. I was about to confront Jenny, and she'd find out about Laura, only not in the way she expected. The next morning, I woke up with this intense clarity, like the whole thing had sharpened my focus. I knew what I had to do. Jenny had lied, betrayed me, and left me humiliated. But I wasn't just going to confront her, hand over proof, and let her slink away with a few words of apology. No, this needed to hurt. She had to feel like I did. And who better to help than her own sister? Laura and I spent hours planning, going over every detail of what was to come. We both agreed that it had to be deliberate and calculated. I wouldn't just confront Jenny out of the blue. I'd make sure she saw her betrayal from every possible angle, and then some. For once I was taking control. The plan was simple. Jenny had a business trip coming up that weekend. She was heading to a conference in the city, one she'd forgotten to mention until last week. Now I knew why. She wouldn't be going alone. Her mystery man, Mr. Important Business Partner, would be there too. I knew because I'd found the messages, flirty, secretive exchanges that made my stomach turn. It was pathetic, really, how openly she paraded around her lies while still trying to play the dutiful wife. But she had no idea that her web of lies was about to unravel. Friday arrived, and Jenny left for her business trip, with that usual detached look on her face. She barely looked up from her phone to say goodbye. Part of me burned with rage, but mostly I just felt done. Done with the pretending, done with the endless guessing games. A few hours after she left, Laura came over, bringing the one thing that would make this plan perfect, a small suitcase. And it was everything Jenny would need to see. My phone with screenshots of her messages, pictures of her with her lover, and to top it off, photos from the night before with Laura. It was bold, brutal, and a bit twisted, but I wanted her to feel the betrayal tenfold. And Laura? She was all in. We staged the whole scene in our bedroom. I lay sprawled across the bed, looking as comfortable as I could manage, with Laura beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, her expression calm. We took a few candid-looking photos, making sure everything was just slightly askew, the sheets messy, the faintest trace of perfume lingering in the air. The final touch. Laura left a note, simple and devastating. You took him for granted, Jenny. I won't make that mistake. When everything was set, I left a text on Jenny's phone. Time to send that evening. I know what you've been doing, Jenny. Come home if you want to see how it feels. As Laura left that afternoon, she squeezed my hand, looking me straight in the eye. I'll be here for you, whatever happens. She did this to herself. By nightfall, Jenny's trip had taken an unexpected turn. She texted, "What's this about, Josh? What's going on?" I ignored her, watching her messages escalate from confusion to desperation. By Sunday morning, I knew it had all hit the fan. She was on her way home. I braced myself, not sure how she'd react, but ready for whatever she'd try to throw at me. I knew that when she walked through that door, everything would change, and she'd finally see the fallout from her own betrayal in a way she'd never forget. When I heard Jenny's car pull into the driveway, my pulse quickened. I stayed calm, pacing the living room, every nerve on edge. She stormed through the door looking frantic, a mix of confusion and anger twisting her features. She barely glanced at me before making a beeline for our bedroom, exactly as I knew she would. "Josh, what the hell is going on?" she yelled, her voice trembling as she took in the scene I'd set up for her. I followed her down the hall, watching as she scanned the room, the crumpled sheets, the suitcase with my phone, and those carefully curated photos waiting to be found. Her eyes narrowed on the note Laura had left, the words sinking in as her expression shifted from fury to a kind of desperate disbelief. "Well, what is this?" she stammered, clutching the note, the color draining from her face. I stood there, arms crossed, letting her unravel, refusing to give her the comfort of an answer. "What's wrong, Jenny?" I asked, my tone cold. "Don't like the taste of your own medicine?" She tried to compose herself, but the cracks were already showing. "This isn't funny, Josh. I don't know what sick game you're playing, but this isn't right," she said, her voice shaking, but I could see the gears turning in her mind, piecing together exactly what I wanted her to understand. "Oh, it's not a game, Jenny," I replied, stepping closer. "You wanted excitement, didn't you? Secret sneaking around? Congratulations, you got your wish. And look, I even took a page out of your playbook." I gestured to the bed, to the photograph she hadn't dared to touch yet. As the weight of it all sank in, her eyes darted to the suitcase, but she was too paralyzed to move. "You and Laura," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I shrugged, a bitter smile on my lips. "I figured if you were having fun with your business partner, maybe I should get a little company too. Your sister just happened to be there for me when I needed her." The words hit her like a slap and her face crumpled, but I felt nothing, just a cold, detached satisfaction that she was finally feeling some of the agony she'd put me through. She shook her head, stammering, "No, I never meant. It wasn't serious, Josh. It was just a mistake, a stupid mistake." "Oh, is that all it was?" I snapped, feeling my anger flare. Funny, because judging by those messages, it looked a lot more than just a mistake. And don't you dare insult my intelligence by pretending this was some harmless fling. You don't accidentally betray someone over and over, Jenny. She tried to step closer, reaching out, but I pulled back, the fury in me surging to the surface. "No, don't even think about it. You lied, you snuck around, you threw away everything we had for some cheap thrill. So now you get to see what that feels like." I couldn't help the bitterness that laced my voice as I continued. "Tell me, Jenny, how does it feel knowing the people you trusted the most are the ones who've been together behind your back?" Her face crumpled as she choked out, "Josh, please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling or something. Just please?" I shook my head, cutting her off. "No, Jenny, you already made your choice. And now I'm making mine." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm done." As she tried to plead, the desperation in her voice rising, I held up a hand. "Don't bother. You've got nothing left to say that could make this better. Pack your things and go. I don't want you here anymore." Her shoulders slumped, and she looked at me with a hollow, defeated expression, as if realizing for the first time just how final this was. I stood there, watching her crumble, knowing there was no going back. Not for her, Not for us. Finally, she turned, moving mechanically toward the bed, collecting her things. Her movements heavy with the weight of her choices. And as she did, I felt that calm satisfaction settle over me again, knowing that she would never forget this moment, the moment she lost everything. As Jenny packed her things, her movements were slow, like every step took twice the effort. I could see the realization settling in. She wasn't just losing me, she was losing everything. And that was exactly what I wanted. I stayed silent, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her every move. Every now and then she'd glance at me with that pleading look, but I didn't budge. I wanted her to feel the cold wall of indifference I'd built up brick by brick since the moment I found out she'd betrayed me. When she finally finished stuffing her clothes into the suitcase, she turned to me, clutching the handle as if it were some kind of lifeline. "Josh," she started, her voice cracking. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please, can we at least talk about this?" "But, talk." I cut her off, letting out a cold laugh. "You had plenty of chances to talk while you were sneaking around, meeting him in hotel rooms lined to my face every night. You don't get to ask for understanding now." Her face fell, and she took a shaky breath, clearly struggling to hold it together. It wasn't like that. I know it sounds hollow, but I didn't want to hurt you. I just got lost, Josh. I made mistakes, yes, terrible ones, but it didn't mean I stopped loving you." The sheer audacity of her words sparked a fury I'd been holding back. "Stop loving me?" I spat, stepping forward, forcing her to look me in the eye. "Do you even know what love is, Jenny? Because the person who loved me, who promised to be there for better or worse, wouldn't have thrown our marriage away for some cheap fling. So don't stand there and feed me these pathetic excuses." She flinched, the impact of my words finally breaking through whatever excuses she'd been clinging to. Tears streamed down her face now, but I felt nothing, not sympathy, not guilt. Just a grim satisfaction that she was feeling the pain she'd caused. In a last-ditch effort, she tried a different tactic. "Josh, please, for everything we've built, for the years we've shared, just give me one chance to make it right. I'll do anything. I can't lose you over this." But the irony of her words only hardened my resolve. I leaned in close, my voice barely a whisper. "You already lost me, Jenny. The moment you decided he was worth more than us, you lost me. Now pack up and go." Realizing she was out of options, she swallowed, wiping her tears, and looked down. She seemed defeated in a way I hadn't thought possible. Finally, without another word, she pulled her suitcase down the hallway, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood as she walked to the door. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of relief and a hollow sense of finality. This was it. She'd chosen her path, and she was reaping the consequences. I followed her to the doorway, leaning against the frame as she stepped out into the cold night air. She turned to look at me one last time, her eyes searching mine for any trace of the man who used to care for her, to stand by her through everything. But that man was gone. All she saw now was the shadow of what she'd shattered. "Goodbye, Jenny," I said, my voice like steel. I didn't wait for her response. I closed the door, shutting out the last 8 years of my life with it. The silence that filled the house was heavy, but it felt like freedom. Finally, I could breathe. Finally, I could start over, rebuild a life that was mine and mine alone. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this was only the beginning. As I turned back into the house, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I checked it and saw a message from Laura. "You okay?" I stared at her message for a moment, realizing just how much her presence had grounded me through this nightmare. I texted back, "I am now. And for the first time in a long time, I'm in it." After Jenny walked out that door, it was like the weight of years lifted off my chest. I thought I'd feel hollow, but instead I felt free. I spent that night in a daze, pouring myself a drink and sitting in the quiet, taking it all in. The years of lies, the betrayal, they were finally behind me. And with every sip, I felt something returning, piece by piece. Control, clarity, maybe even hope. Later, I checked my phone again, seeing Laura's message still lingering on the screen. There was something about her calm support through all this that felt solid, like an anchor keeping me from drifting too far into anger or despair. I shot back a quick, "Thanks for everything." Not sure what I'd have done without you. I didn't expect an answer not that late, but almost immediately she replied, Want to meet up? I'll bring over some coffee. We can just talk if you want. I hesitated, feeling a mixture of gratitude and something else, something I couldn't quite name yet. But I knew I didn't want to be alone in that empty house, haunted by memories of a life that no longer existed. So I agreed. Sure, come over. Within half an hour, she was at my doorstep, coffee in hand. Her expression open and warm, a quiet understanding in her eyes that was comforting and grounding. We settled into the living room, and I realized I didn't even need to say anything. She just listened, letting me vent, letting me get everything out that I'd held back for months. It felt like years of frustration were finally breaking free. Josh, she said softly, her hand resting on mine. You didn't deserve any of this. You're a good man, and anyone with half a brain would see that. Her voice wavered slightly, but her gaze stayed steady, making me feel a sense of reassurance I hadn't known I'd needed. For a moment we just sat there, the silence between us thick but not uncomfortable. And then, without thinking, I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She looked up at me, surprised but not pulling away. It was like time slowed and the whole world faded until it was just the two of us, caught in this moment that felt strangely inevitable. I don't know what's next, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. But I do know that, whatever happens, I'm grateful you were here. She smiled, that gentle, knowing smile that had become my lifeline through this nightmare. I'm here, Josh, she said simply. And then with a hesitant breath, she leaned in, her hands still resting over mine. Before I knew it, we were kissing, slowly, tentatively at first, but then with a fire that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. It wasn't just passion. It was comfort, release, a silent understanding of everything we'd been through. For the first time in months, I felt alive, felt seen. And as we pulled apart, I saw the same relief, the same longing mirrored in her eyes. We didn't need to speak. In that moment, words would have just gotten in the way. We sat there together, our hands entwined, the air between us charged with a new, unfamiliar warmth. Whatever lay ahead, I knew this much. My past was behind me, and maybe, just maybe, I had something worth looking forward to again. That night, as we sat in the quiet glow of the room, I felt the first true flicker of peace. I didn't know where things with Laura would lead, or even if we get through the complexities that lay ahead. But for now, sitting there with her hand in mine, I knew I wasn't alone. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The days that followed felt like waking up from a long, dark dream. With Jenny gone, the house felt different. Emptier, yes, but also lighter. I could finally breathe without the constant tension of mistrust hanging over me. I kept replaying everything that had happened, and while there were still moments of anger and pain, they were growing smaller, easier to bear. My mind kept drifting to Laura and the way she'd been there for me. Unflinching, steady, and compassionate in a way I'd needed more than I'd realized. Laura and I took things slowly, letting each step unfold naturally. We spent time together, sometimes just sitting quietly with coffee, other times talking about the mess of it all, how it felt to pick up the pieces. We had a strange but undeniable connection, one that felt earned, like two people who had seen each other through the worst and come out on the other side. But we weren't rushing. We both knew it wasn't about rushing towards something new, but about letting the dust settle on the past. One weekend, she suggested we get away for a bit. Nothing big, just a small cabin by the lake a few hours out of town. The idea of escaping everything, of leaving behind all the painful reminders even for a couple of days, felt like exactly what I needed. So we packed our bags, loaded up the car, and headed out, leaving all the wreckage behind us for a while. The cabin was perfect, simple, cozy, nestled right against the lake with trees surrounding us on all sides. We spent our days hiking the trails, talking about anything and everything, and our nights sitting by the fire, sharing stories, sometimes in comfortable silence, letting the warmth and calm seep into us. It was a kind of peace I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten it existed. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, painting everything in shades of orange and gold, Laura turned to me, a quiet smile on her face. "I know this might sound strange, but I'm grateful for all of it," she said, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "Not what you went through, not for a second, but for this, for us finding each other in all of it." I took her hand, pulling her close as I thought about her words. She was right. Despite all the pain, all the heartache, here we were with a chance to rebuild something real, something honest. "I feel the same," I whispered, feeling that warmth, that calm settle in my chest. "It feels like maybe all of this, everything we've been through, led us right here." We sat there, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, and in that moment, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Returning home, I felt ready to take on the next chapter with a renewed strength I hadn't expected. I filed for divorce, a step that once felt impossible, but now seemed like a simple formality. Jenny made no attempt to contest it. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to salvage. I felt a strange sense of relief, like I'd finally closed the door on a chapter that had weighed me down for far too long. When the papers were signed, Laura was there waiting for me outside the courthouse, her quiet support grounding me in a way that words couldn't. We didn't need to say much. Her presence was enough, a silent reassurance that I wasn't facing any of this alone. As the weeks turned into months, our lives began to intertwine naturally. Laura was a constant, my partner, my friend, my anchor in every way I'd needed. She understood me, understood the wounds I carried, and accepted them without question. We took things slowly, never forcing anything, just letting the bond between us deepen and grow. Then, one quiet afternoon as we sat on the porch of the new place we'd found together, a modest home on the edge of town, she reached for my hand, her fingers lacing with mine as she looked out at the horizon. "Josh, I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with a quiet hope. "But whatever it is, I'm here for it, all of it. With you." I turned to her, my heart full, feeling that same warmth, that same peace that had grown between us through every step of this journey. "Me too," I replied, meaning it more than I'd ever meant anything. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." And as we sat there, hand in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of contentment and purpose that had been missing for far too long. The past was behind me, and the future, whatever it held, felt brighter than I could have imagined. In Laura's hand, I found not just a partner, but a new beginning, a chance to build a life from the ashes of everything I'd lost. For the first time, I felt truly ready to live, to love, to trust again. And I knew deep down that whatever storms came our way, we'd face them together, side by side, in a bond forged from resilience, understanding, and a love born from the darkest of times.